Hi everyone. Today I'm thinking I want to really deal with the really sticky topic of what happens to families after the person with disability finds their own life. And hasn't that been a really big thing for so many of us, where we were told that our sons and daughters would never be leaving us, that they would need us forever. And then suddenly we find ourselves in a situation where that person is moving out and actually doing it with a great deal of interest and alacrity, leaving us slightly kind of amazed at the idea that this could even possibly happen. And for many of us, I think, a giant hole where all that love, support, effort that was focused on that individual now does not need to be focused in the same way. The first thing I want to say about this is, even though the effort is not going to be needed to be focused in the same way, this does not mean that actually people moving out will not need your focus and your effort for the rest of that person's life. Because it's not really a handing over, is it? It's actually about assisting the person to their own life and knowing that, like all our children, but particularly the child with the bigger vulnerability, we will need to be present. We will need to understand what's going on. We will need at times to advocate for him or her. And so I think there is an opportunity for a new job if we decide to take that job up, a new way of being with the person. And of course there's a lot of effort going to have to be made to really change the way we are with that individual and renegotiate for us to have a relationship with our adult son or daughter. So this will be very different to the one that we had before, if things are going well for your adult child who's now moved out. It's interesting, isn't it, because we were told so vehemently that this person would never grow and develop. And maybe if your son or daughter has very significant disabilities, you might have thought, or people might have told you, that would mean it was impossible for him or her to actually have a life of their own. But of course this is not true. In fact, one of the things I've noticed is that the level of disability is not one of the preemptors, the thing that tells us, a predictor of whether this person will actually be able to have a life of their own, or be successful in their life, or learn to do new things, or whatever it is that we're trying to work on at the time. So once that person moves out, we're left in this situation, aren't we, where there's this giant gap. And there is a big question, I think, about what will happen for us. And I think this can be for men or women, but I think particularly for women, there is like a lot of guilt and stuff that people might have about the move, even when we actually know that this is the right thing to do on so many levels. I think men might often do better at that than we do, really, because we don't give them much credit. So it is quite nice if we can give them some when we can, hey? And there have been so many fabulous fathers who have really cared for and supported their sons and daughters, and that includes my own family. So I'm certainly not being smart about that. So the funny thing that happens is, by the time the person moves out, our lives have really moved on, haven't they? We aren't 20 anymore, when we might have started this process, or 25 or 30, we might be 50, 60, 70 before this actually happens. And so there's this very strange kind of feeling of like, well, will I get my life back? What will I be doing with this, one great big beautiful thing called my life from now on? And I think that we don't talk enough about that, and I'd be very interested for people to put some comments to this video to discuss how it's worked for you. So I need to say that I started my life as a mother working on the idea I was going to do myself out of a job. I don't want you to think I wasn't a good mother or a disinterested mother. I adore my children, and I really think I was a very good mum. But actually, I was never thinking I was just going to be a mother. It just wasn't in my DNA to think that. And so I was always trying to work out how this was always going to work in the long term. And I had absolutely no guilt when my two people with disability in my family moved out to have their own lives. In fact, I actively worked to make that happen for them. Just as I didn't have any guilt when my middle child moved out of home and went and had her own life as well, because I've always had that vision that really whatever she was doing was the stuff I'd like to see as closely as possible could happen for the other two. So, yes, well, so what are we going to do? So I think one of the things that could be very big for some of us is the loss of control. Even if we still are working with a service that understands like a family-driven support, even when we've got, we might be in charge of the support. The fact of the matter is, when you hand over a lot of, all the support to other people, there is a difference in the level of control you have over what goes on in the day-to-day. And all of those of you who know me know that family-driven services are what I'm really into if the person with disability can't drive it for themselves. But I do think that even in that process, we end up with a lot less control than we had before. And there can be a kind of interesting disconnection. When my mum moved out from my house, we'd arranged a different kind of care for her, again, still in her own, in her own place. And my sister and I would go over there and see her every day. But when I had my hands off her, I wasn't actually helping now with bathing or personal care or any of the things I was doing for her when she lived with me. And she was now in a situation where other people did most of that. It was kind of interesting. I didn't always know how things were going for her. Having that level of closeness and intimacy had been like one of the ways that I could gauge where she was in the world. And so I think this is a pretty funny thing for those of us who've had to do some pretty intense care for our sons and daughters, to be in a situation where we now find ourselves not doing those things and having to find different ways to communicate and connect with him or her. And I think the other thing is, for a lot of families, when this transition happens, is there's a belief that no one else can do it like I do it. And you'd be right about that, actually, totally right. Because we do not want the transition to ever be that the person ends up with another mother or father. They've got a perfectly good one. We don't really need to be thinking that they need to have another one. We just need to actually know that what we want is very good, keyed in and engaged personal and other supports for our children. And we will stay as the parents in every single way that we ever did. I think that's one of the interesting things, though, isn't it, though, about being the parent of somebody who needs you to be mindful and careful and aware of what's going on. Like for my middle daughter, I would never go to her house without calling first to tell her I was coming, because I like that myself. I like people to tell me when they're coming. So I always do that for her. And so I've always done the same thing for both my daughter and my son, so that I never barged in. I was never there when people didn't expect me to be there. And if I thought I had to test out whether the care was right, I don't know that that's the way I would be doing it. There'd probably be other things I'd need to do to make sure things were all right for them in their daily lives and the way they were being supported. I think one of the most beautiful things we can do for our children with disability is to help them find a way into their own lives and to move out of home. Someone said to me once, Anne, I think you think that everybody should move out of home. Yeah, I do. Actually, I do. I think it's very hard for people to grow up, anyone with or without disability, when they live at home too long. And so I really think that one of the ways that we can make sure people get that chance to kind of get adult status is to be actually living in their own home and given that real valued role of being, the tenant, the owner, the person who pays the rent, all those things. To actually have that level of status in the world is a very adult-making thing. And able to redefine themselves. So just as you are probably struggling to redefine who you're going to be now that you've grown up, the same thing will apply for our children. And so as people move out of home, there are amazing opportunities for people to redefine themselves, to see themselves differently, to have a different view about the world, and to manage things in a different kind of way, which is the great gift we give when we help people do this. And I think there is also the freedom to do more for themselves, to not have that lower expectation that we as families can often have. Even when we've got high expectations, we can find ourselves having less expectations that maybe a talented support worker might have. Of course, this is all underpinned by all the stuff we've spoken about before and all the other videos about how it is very... all this is conditional on having people who are working with your son or daughter who are able to provide the level of support the way we think it should be. The support is right, and we've got people there that we know are able to do that work the way it needs to be done. then we can relax a little bit, I think, and just get on with our own lives. So, having said that, what is there that we need to do for ourselves now that we've got so much more time and energy? Well, I don't know about you, but when I stopped doing the intensive caring, it's been quite a while now since I've done, like full-time caring. There's been a lot of times where John, Val's dad, and I have actually shared the support. I've done all sorts of different ways of supporting Val. But since I actually stopped doing that intensive support, which would probably be close to 10 years, I think it's only in the last little while that I've started to process some of what it means to be like the parent of someone who's grown up and achieved a life of their own. It's been a long time coming. And it's been interesting because I live a glorious life alone. I love living alone. I used to joke when I first moved into my apartment, which is a high-rise apartment, that people would be downstairs calling, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair and let me up. And I'd be, no, go away. I'm just happy here by myself. And I still feel that way, even though I'm a deeply extroverted person. I love my own space. And so it's taken me a long time to even just get to this bit and to understand this bit. And I've had to rebuild old friendships, reconnect with people that every time they ever asked me to go out, I couldn't go, and had to find new friendships with new people if those old ones weren't available to me anymore. I think there's questions about what do you do with your spare time? Will you find a hobby? Will you find something you could do for other people? If you're a person who loves to care and look after people, you might find yourself a hobby. I've been recently looking into there's a little thing called the pajama something or other here in Queensland where you can go and read to children in foster care. And for me, I think anything around children I find a real joy. So I've been thinking about signing up for that as a way to give something back to people. And for some people, it might be taking up a job for the very first time in an enormously long time. For many people, it was impossible to get paid work while their son or daughter, was in their care. And so finding those things, I think, is a very big deal. The other thing I think that can happen is that we can feel like it's too late. That the opportunity to do those things was earlier. And now if we find ourselves at 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever, that now it's too late to actually find that life. And I really want to say to you, I do not believe that. I think it's our responsibility to have the very best life we can. It's something that you have to work very hard to get. I feel like it's part of how we need to kind of make amends with our children for all the time we had to give them, to actually now look after ourselves and find that great life for ourselves. So my advice to other people, having I think achieved it for myself, is to go out and find that good life and feel good about that and know that you've done an amazing thing to give your child the chance to grow up and to have a life of their own, and for you to be here to make sure things go well for him or her in that life is the most powerful thing you can do. So congratulations if that's you now, and if that's what you're trying to work on. I think next of these in this series will be one on planning for your children, which may or may not include the idea that they may leave home soon or in the future. So that's all we're going to talk about today. I'd love to hear your comments and how other people have managed this. I think there's a lot of families out there who could really do with some help to think this through. And so, yes, please tell us what you've been doing about that, and maybe your fears, and maybe the things that turned out you thought they were fearful, but they weren't. Go forth, do good. May the force be with you. Shazam. Bye.